There's a dangerous lie that almost everyone believes. The more you want something, the more you should demonstrate it. More effort, more insistence, more intensity. It seems logical, even virtuous, but in practice, it's sabotaging you, silently. Because the world doesn't respond to your intention, it responds to your position. And here's a disturbing statement. The more you demonstrate need, the less value you convey. It's counterintuitive, but absolutely true. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract opportunities without desperately chasing after them, while others, even trying much harder, always remain one step behind? This isn't luck. This is social reading. It's the human brain interpreting invisible signals and making quick decisions. Who deserves attention, who can be ignored, who has value, who doesn't. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wasn't talking about an ideal world. He was talking about the world as it really works. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. And within this logic, demonstrating need is equivalent to surrendering your power before the negotiation even begins. Because exposed need becomes perceived weakness, and perceived weakness reduces respect, reduces interest, and, most importantly, reduces opportunities. The most curious thing? This happens without anyone consciously realizing it. It's automatic. It's instinctive, and that's exactly why most people keep making mistakes. They're playing an emotional game in an environment that responds to strategic signals. But here's the good news. If this game exists, it can be understood and mastered. Because throughout this content, you'll realize it's not about having more money, more status, or more time. It's about how you're perceived even before you open your mouth. It's about how small signals build or destroy your image. And most importantly, how adjusting those signals can completely change how the world responds to you. But to do that, you need to be willing to abandon some comfortable beliefs and face reality as it is, not as it should be. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He hasn't even opened his mouth yet, and he's already been judged. It sounds harsh, but that's how the game begins. Fast, silent, and often unfair. The human brain doesn't ask permission to analyze. It simply decides. In fractions of a second, before any word is even spoken, the mind of the observer has already constructed an entire narrative. It's as if each person carries an internal court operating 24 hours a day, delivering sentences based on appearance, posture, and energy. And here comes one of the most brutal ideas that few admit. Politics guided by reality, not ideals. No matter how intelligent or capable someone is, if they don't appear to be, they will hardly be treated as such. This is where many miss opportunities without even understanding why. They think the problem lies in competence, when in fact, it's in the first impression. Machiavelli already warned, the appearance of virtue often weighs more than virtue itself. And this isn't about being false, it's about understanding how the world really works. Now consider a simple example. Two people enter a meeting, one with a firm posture, calm gaze, controlled movements. The other, insecure, looking down, constantly adjusting their clothing. Who do you think will be heard first? who conveys more authority even before speaking. This is where the concept of being better feared than loved comes in, not in the literal sense of causing fear, but of generating immediate respect. Because respect, at this level, doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what you demonstrate without saying anything. Instant judgment is cruel because it doesn't wait for explanations. It doesn't give a second chance on the first impact. And the most curious thing, it's automatic, both for the one who judges and for the one who is judged. In other words, you do it too, even without realizing it. This means that understanding this mechanism is not just defense, it's a strategic advantage. And it is precisely at this point that most people make a fatal mistake. They ignore the invisible game and insist on playing only the visible game. They believe that effort, dedication, and time will be enough to change their position. But they forget that, before any result appears, someone has already decided whether you deserve attention or not. Virtù and fortuna begin to mix here. Skill and luck meet when you learn to control what can be seen immediately. Because in the end, decisions based on real human nature always prevail. And human nature judges quickly, very quickly. But this opens a dangerous door. If appearance has so much weight, what happens to those who transmit the wrong signals without realizing it? He may be competent, dedicated, full of good intentions, but if he displays visual signs of scarcity, the world responds differently. It's not pretty to admit, but it's true. The appearance of poverty isn't seen merely as a lack of money, it's interpreted as a lack of worth. And here enters one of the most silent gears of social dynamics. People associate external signs with internal patterns. Worn clothes, tired posture, low energy. All of this is read as failure, lack of control, or even bad luck. Does it seem cruel? It is, but that's exactly why Machiavelli spoke about the importance of the appearance of virtue. It's not enough to be, you have to appear to be. Because collective judgment doesn't analyze deeply, it categorizes quickly. And within this logic, the world avoids what seems weak, just as it avoids what seems contaminated. It's harsh, but the end justifies the means when the goal is not to be discarded before even being considered. Now observe something interesting. When someone enters an environment conveying scarcity, whether in the form of anxiety, need, or even carelessness, it automatically generates an invisible distancing effect. People begin to close themselves off, even without realizing why. This happens because human beings seek proximity to that which conveys stability, control, and security. It's almost instinctive. Imagine two professionals offering the same service. One seems organized, confident, and well-presented. The other demonstrates urgency, speaks too quickly, and seems desperately in need of the opportunity. Who would you choose? Herein lies the paradox that few understand. Demonstrating need drives away opportunities. And this connects directly to the idea that it's better to be feared than loved, because respect is born from the perception of strength, not neediness. Whoever seems too needy loses negotiating power before even starting. But the most dangerous thing isn't just how others see you, it's how you start behaving from that point on. When someone internalizes this image of scarcity, their decisions become guided by fear, not strategy. And that's where another essential principle comes in: decisions based on real human nature. The person accepts less, positions themselves worse, negotiates at a disadvantage, all because deep down they feel they can't miss that opportunity. And the world notices this. It always notices. That's why Machiavelli spoke about the calculated use of force. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in acting, but in not showing need, in maintaining composure, even when there is internal pressure. But this leads to an even deeper question. If a simple external detail can affect perception so much, what happens when that detail is specifically negative? He may be well-dressed, eloquent, and knowledgeable, but a single detail out of place is enough to cause everything to crumble. A dirty shoe, a sloppy posture, an insecure look. That's it. The judgment changes. This has a name, the horn effect. It's when a small negative point contaminates the entire perception others have of you. It's as if the human mind says, if this is wrong, the rest must be too. And the most interesting or dangerous thing is that this happens automatically, without conscious analysis. Here, once again, politics guided by reality, not ideals, comes into play, because in an ideal world, people would analyze the whole. But in the real world, they cling to the first available sign. Machiavelli understood this perfectly when talking about the appearance of virtue. It's not about perfection, but about avoiding visible flaws that generate doubt, because doubt at that level destroys authority before it even exists. Now imagine a practical situation. A professional arrives at an important meeting, well prepared with solid arguments, but his shirt is wrinkled and his posture conveys tiredness. What happens? Even if no one says anything, the perception has already been tainted. The observer's mind begins to fill in the gaps. If he doesn't take care of this, does he take care of his work? Do you see the pattern? A detail becomes a shortcut to larger judgments, and this connects directly to decisions based on real human nature. The brain seeks efficiency. It doesn't want to spend energy analyzing deeply, so it uses quick signals to form conclusions. Therefore, the calculated use of force also involves controlling these micro-details. Because often, it's not what you do that's grand that defines your image. It's what you neglect in the basics. And here's the point that separates those who understand the game from those who are still trying to play it naively. Avoiding visible mistakes is worth more than trying to prove invisible qualities. It sounds harsh, but it makes sense. It's easier to lose credibility over a small detail than to gain it through a set of virtues. Therefore, the idea of avoiding being hated also involves avoiding those negative triggers that awaken immediate rejection. Because once the horn effect kicks in, reversing the image requires much more effort than building it correctly from the start. And this raises an even more strategic question. If small negative signals have this power, what happens when someone learns to consciously manipulate positive signals from the very beginning? He doesn't yet have the power, but he already seems to. And curiously, this begins to change how the world responds to him. This is the essence of the prince's mask, a concept that few understand and many reject out of pure attachment to idealistic ideas. Machiavelli didn't advocate empty falsehood, but rather strategy, the appearance of virtue as a tool to shape reality. Because in the end, politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means recognizing that people react to what they see, not to what you promise to be in the future. So instead of waiting to have in order to appear, the game is reversed. You begin to appear in order to then have. This is not illusion, it's anticipation. It's understanding that perception opens doors that effort alone would take years to open. And here comes a delicate point. Those who don't control their own image end up being defined by the perception of others, and this almost never works in their favor. Now consider a simple and practical example. A young professional begins to position himself as someone strategic. He speaks calmly, avoids exaggeration, dresses appropriately for more sophisticated environments, and observes more than he speaks. He doesn't yet have groundbreaking results, but his demeanor already signals direction. What happens? People begin to treat him differently. Opportunities, invitations, and greater responsibilities arise. Not because he has already proven everything, but because he seems like someone who is on the right track. This is virtu and fortuna working together, skill in positioning oneself, and the luck that arises as a consequence of this perception. And here, another principle comes in. It is better to be feared than loved, not in the sense of intimidation, but of silent respect. Whoever conveys control, even without speaking much, creates a presence that cannot be ignored. And this, in many contexts, is worth more than excessive charisma. But this is where many people get stuck. They confuse strategic simulation with moral hypocrisy. But Machiavelli was clear: the calculated use of force and image isn't about deception. It's about surviving and thriving in an environment where everyone is already, consciously or unconsciously, playing this game. Those who ignore this are exposed. Those who understand position themselves. And more, they learn to adapt their own image according to the context, because constant adaptability is one of the greatest advantages in any competitive environment. The problem is that when you start to appear strong, an inevitable paradox arises. People begin to see you as someone who doesn't need as much, and this completely changes how resources, opportunities, and even respect reach you. He's not chasing after opportunities, and yet opportunities seem to come to him. This is one of the most uncomfortable paradoxes to accept. Resources flow to those who demonstrate that they don't desperately need them. It may seem unfair at first glance, but it makes perfect sense within the logic of politics guided by reality, not ideals. Human beings associate excessive need with risk, instability, and even incompetence. Those who project control, calm, and autonomy convey the idea of value, and value attracts value. It's almost as if there's an invisible rule. Those who seem overly dependent lose the power of choice, and those who seem to choose gain the power of attraction. Machiavelli already pointed this out when talking about avoiding being hated and maintaining the appearance of virtue, because those who demonstrate desperation often overstep boundaries, devalue themselves, and lose respect. And without respect, there is no favorable negotiation. Now observe this in practice. Two salespeople offer the same product. One insists, pressures, sends messages all the time, tries to convince at any cost. The other presents, explains, positions themselves, and, if there is no interest, simply moves on. Who conveys more confidence? Who seems to have more control over their own game? This second professional applies, even without realizing it, the calculated use of force. They understand that they don't need to force. Their posture already communicates value, and this activates a powerful trigger in the other's mind. If they're not desperate, maybe what they're offering is really good. Here, virtù and fortuna meet again. The ability to not demonstrate need creates the scenario where luck begins to work in your favor. And the most interesting thing, this isn't limited to money. It works in relationships, career, networking, in everything that involves the exchange of value. But there's a detail that few people realize. Not showing need doesn't mean not needing. It means not letting it control your behavior. Because when need becomes apparent, it changes your language, your tone of voice, your decisions. You start accepting less, negotiating worse, acting hastily, and the world notices. It always notices. That's why decisions based on real human nature require emotional self-control. Sometimes the greatest power lies in knowing when to step back, wait, and not react impulsively. But when adjusting this behavior, something even more subtle comes into play. It's not just what you have or how you behave. It's how your body communicates all of this, even when you're silent. He enters the room and doesn't need to say much to be noticed. Not because he's trying to draw attention, but because his presence communicates before any words. This is where many people underestimate the game. They believe that communication is only what is said, when, in fact, what is left unsaid carries even more weight. posture, gaze, rhythm of movements, pauses. All of this forms an invisible language that the brains of others interpret instantly. And once again, we enter the logic of politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It doesn't matter what you intend to convey. What matters is what your body is actually communicating. Machiavelli already understood this when he spoke of the appearance of virtue. External behavior must support the internal image, because if there is inconsistency, judgment comes quickly and almost always against you. Now consider a simple example. In a conversation, two people are defending a point. One speaks quickly, gestures excessively, interrupts, and seems to want to prove something all the time. The other speaks slowly, maintains eye contact, listens attentively, and responds calmly. Who conveys more authority? Who seems more confident? This is where the concept of being better feared than loved comes in, again, not in the sense of intimidation, but of silent respect. Controlled calmness generates a feeling of power. Excessive movement, on the other hand, often reveals anxiety, and anxiety at this level is perceived as weakness. Therefore, the calculated use of force also manifests itself in the economy of actions. Whoever controls their own rhythm controls perception. And this is extremely applicable. Reducing unnecessary movements, holding eye contact for a few seconds longer, avoiding immediate responses, small adjustments that completely change how you are seen. But silence, that's the real difference, because well-used silence creates space for the other person to fill in with interpretation. And interestingly, people tend to project more value onto those who speak less and observe more. This happens because the brain associates silence with control, reflection, and even hierarchical superiority. It's as if it were saying, he doesn't need to prove anything. And here comes another important point: constant adaptability. Knowing when to speak and when not to speak is one of the most strategic skills someone can develop. Because, in many moments, it's not the strongest argument that wins. It's the most stable presence. But even mastering this, there's still an external factor that can amplify or destroy this entire construction: the people you are seen with. He may be disciplined, focused, strategic, but simply being constantly seen with the wrong people is enough to have his image reinterpreted. This is called visual drag, the silent effect where your perceived value is pulled up or down by the group you appear with, and this happens automatically, without deep analysis. The human mind saves energy by creating shortcuts. If he hangs out with that kind of person, he's probably like them. Simple as that. Once again, politics guided by reality, not ideals. It doesn't matter if internally you're different. The world judges by what is visible. Machiavelli already pointed out something similar when talking about having your own loyal armies. You are only as strong as what surrounds you. Your environment communicates through you. And often, it communicates louder than your words. Now consider a practical example. Two professionals have the same technical level. One is frequently seen alongside disorganized, unambitious people with an overly relaxed demeanor. The other circulates in environments where there is discipline, focus, and a higher standard. Who do you think will be associated with more opportunities? Even without knowing either of them deeply, the perception is already formed. And this isn't about elitism. It's about perceived standards. The human brain uses the group as a reference for value. Therefore, decisions based on real human nature require awareness of the environment you place yourself in. It's not just about who you are, it's about who you are seen with. And this is entirely applicable. Reviewing your circles, choosing better events, environments, and even public interactions can drastically change how you are perceived. But here's a delicate point. Many resist this idea because they confuse strategy with betrayal or arrogance. They think that changing environments means abandoning people. However, in the logic of the social game, it's about positioning. It's about understanding that your image isn't built in isolation, it's reflected by the context. And this connects directly to the appearance of virtue. You need to be in environments that support the narrative you want to build. Otherwise, there's incoherence. And incoherence generates doubt, and doubt weakens your presence. Therefore, the calculated use of force also involves choosing where to appear and with whom to appear. Because in the end, it's not just you who is being evaluated, it's the whole group. And when that group begins to be adjusted, an even more strategic tool emerges, the ability to control what you show and what you hide. He feels the pressure, but nobody notices. He's still building, but it seems consolidated. This is where many get stuck due to a limiting belief. They think that projecting strength before fully possessing it is deceitful. But within Machiavelli's logic, this is strategy. Simulation and dissimulation aren't about deceiving out of malice. They're about protecting the process while it's still fragile, because the world doesn't react to what you feel. It reacts to what you demonstrate. And once again, politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Those who expose weakness uncontrollably become targets of doubt, devaluation, and even exploitation. Those who maintain the appearance of virtue, even while under construction, gain time, space, and respect to evolve. It's like sustaining a structure until it strengthens from within. Now think about something practical. An entrepreneur is starting out, still testing ideas, without solid results. If he communicates this in a raw way, insecure, hesitant, full of maybes, what happens? People doubt, back away, avoid associating with him. But if he communicates clearly, maintains a firm posture, speaks with conviction about the direction, the perception changes. He's not lying about results, he's controlling how he presents the process. This is a calculated use of force. It's understanding that until the reality is consolidated, the narrative needs to be protected. And here also comes the idea that it's better to be feared than loved, again in the sense of respect. Someone who seems confident, even while still building, imposes a presence that reduces unnecessary questioning. And this opens doors that would otherwise remain closed. But there's a fine line here. Simulating strength doesn't mean exaggerating, promising what you can't deliver, or creating an overly artificial persona. Because if there's inconsistency, the game backfires. And the effect is even worse. That's why decisions based on real human nature require balance. You show enough to generate trust, but you don't expose what could weaken your position. This is constant adaptability, knowing how much to reveal in each context. And when this skill begins to develop, something bigger comes into play. It's not enough to control an isolated aspect. True strength emerges when everything, appearance, posture, language, environment, begins to work together as a single system. He no longer depends on a single detail to make an impact, because everything around him communicates the same message. This is the level few reach, when clothing, posture, words, environment, and relationships form a coherent ecosystem of authority. Here, there is no more noise, there is no more doubt, because everything is aligned. And this is the most refined application of politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It's not enough to adjust an isolated point. It's necessary to understand that perception is built by a whole. Machiavelli already pointed this out when talking about having your own loyal armies and about the appearance of virtue. Your strength lies not only in you, but in the structure that sustains you. When everything points in the same direction, instant judgment works in your favor. And at this stage, you stop trying to convince and become naturally accepted as a reference. Now, let's apply this to the practical world. A person who dresses well but has an insecure posture creates inconsistency. Someone who speaks confidently but walks in disorganized environments does the same. The secret lies in integration. Adjusting clothing to the right context, developing a firm posture, choosing words precisely, controlling the pace of speech, selecting better environments, and, above all, social circles. This is the calculated use of force at a more sophisticated level. It's not about exaggeration, it's about eliminating contradictions. And here's a powerful point. When there is no contradiction, there is no room for doubt. And without a doubt, perception consolidates quickly. This connects with virtù and fortuna, because the more aligned you are, the more luck seems to find you. In fact, it's not luck. It's coherence being interpreted as value. But the most interesting thing is that when this ecosystem is balanced, you no longer need to prove yourself as much. Your presence does the work, your choices speak for you. And this drastically reduces the effort required to generate respect, attract opportunities, and influence decisions. This is where better to be feared than loved takes on a new meaning. Not because of fear, but because of solidity. Because of the absence of visible fragility. And at the same time, you avoid being hated because your image doesn't generate noise or distrust. Everything seems natural, fluid, inevitable. But reaching this level requires something few are willing to do, to honestly look at yourself and adjust every detail that was previously ignored. Because in the end, it's not the world that needs to change to see you differently. It's the sum of your presence that needs to evolve, so that the world has no choice but to respond differently. Now let me ask you a direct question. How many opportunities have you missed without even realizing it? How many doors have been closed before you even had the chance to speak, to show who you are, to prove your worth? It's uncomfortable to think about, I know. But it's precisely this discomfort that separates those who remain in the same place from those who begin to play the game consciously. Because, from now on, you can no longer say you don't know. You understand how instant judgment works, how the appearance of poverty pushes people away, how a single detail can destroy your image, how the right mask can open doors, how demonstrating need weakens your position. So the question is no longer, why does this happen? The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep waiting for the world to recognize your worth on its own? Or are you going to start signaling that value strategically? Are you going to keep putting yourself in environments that drag you down? Or are you going to choose contexts that elevate your perception? Are you going to keep reacting with anxiety? Or are you going to learn to control your posture, your silence, your presence? Because in the end, decisions based on real human nature demand responsibility. It's no use wanting different results while maintaining the same signals. And here's something essential. You don't need to change who you are, but you need to align how you are perceived. Adjust your ecosystem, your language, your image, your choices. This isn't about falsehood, it's about awareness. It's about understanding that if you don't control the narrative, someone else will control it for you. So I want to challenge you for real. Look at your life today. The way you dress, speak, walk, position yourself, choose who you associate with. Is all of that working for you or against you? If someone saw you for the first time today, what would their verdict be in a few seconds? Are you projecting strength or neediness, control or scarcity? And more importantly, are you willing to adjust that? Because that decision changes everything. If this content made you see something you weren't seeing before, then you've already taken the first step. Now it's time to continue. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because here you won't receive empty motivation. You'll learn to play the game as it really is.